well.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio. From the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller is out today, so I am flying solo, but we have our trusty folks in the box today, so appreciate that. Today on the program, we are obviously going to be spending a lot of time dissecting the Mercedes UAW loss down in Vance, Alabama, but we're also going to be spending a lot of time talking about the CWA union's win at New Flyer in Anniston, where the union was able to secure double-digit raises and more time off and more. We're going to be talking about that. And bringing on Luis Leon from Labor Notes to break down the election at Mercedes in Vance, Alabama. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might answer it on the next program. Just want to make sure that if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. You can subscribe to our newsletters there. You will get Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch in your email inbox every single week if you subscribe to the newsletters. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. You can make a donation at tvlr.fm/donate. You can do that on a one-time basis or as a recurring monthly contribution. You can also buy our new hat at tvlr.fm/store. It's not actually new. It is a rerun of our very popular logo cap. It's just a standard baseball cap with our logo on it. Union made in the USA, obviously, unlike, conservative politicians. You can also go to our Patreon at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report if you'd like to support the show there. And if you're a member of a union, you can get your local to sponsor the show. Your local or international union, your labor federation, whatever it is, your union or union-friendly business, all of those types of organizations are welcome. You can reach out to us for more details on that. And since Adam is not here, I will be adding a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We're proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, and you can check that out online as well. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just diehard unionists that believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement deserve a bigger platform, and we're hoping that this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you. So really appreciate everybody for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us. With that, we're going to go ahead and get right to Last Week in Southern Labor. I know that everybody wants to hear our thoughts on the Mercedes election, but the programming is important. We have to stick to form. So we're going to talk about what happened last week in Southern Labor, and then on the other side of the break, we'll break down what happened at Mercedes in Tuscaloosa. So here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from May the 10th to May 17th. In new union campaigns, workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify Unite Here Local 25 as the union representing 69 workers at Sofitel Washington, D.C. Lafayette Square, a hotel in Washington, D.C. 80 workers at Castle Energy Group in Meridian, Mississippi filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers, Pipe Fitters, and Steam Fitters, UA Local 798. 20 workers at Rural Metro Fire Department in Chattanooga, Tennessee filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF. 6 security guards at Kerberos International in Arlington, Virginia filed a petition to hold a union election with the Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA, although they are already represented by Union Rights for Security Officers, URSO. 250 workers at Cargill Cook in Fort Worth, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 540. 5 workers at Glades Electric Cooperative in Moore Haven, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1933. 10 security guards at Allied Universal in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Government Security Officers of America, UGSOA, Local 259. 10 workers at Florida Public Utilities Company in Winter Haven, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with an unnamed union, probably a data error on the NLRB site. 18 workers at Starbucks in River Ridge, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 122 workers at Corning Distribution Center in Tarboro, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 32 workers at Accordius Health in Wilson, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with UFCW Local 1208. 54 workers at Choice Adhesive Corporation in Lynchburg, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with IBEW Local 2173. In campaign updates, Hyundai workers rallied at a local Montgomery, Alabama church with the support of Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign as they tried to build support for their union election with the United Auto Workers. In election results, 5,075 workers at Mercedes in Vance, Alabama voted 2,045 to 2,642 against unionization with the UAW after a last-minute blitz by third-party union busters and the new CEO, who one worker estimated personally talked to 4,000 workers. 67 workers at KLS Martin Manufacturing in Jacksonville, Florida, withdrew their petition for a union election with an unnamed union, probably another data error with the NLRB's website. 6 workers at Hospital General de Castaner in Lares, Puerto Rico, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU Local 1199. 23 workers at Penske Truck Leasing in Nashville, Tennessee, voted 8-15 against unionization with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW, Local Lodge 735. 230 workers at District of Columbia International School in Washington, D.C., voted 132-59 in favor of unionization with the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, Local 1927. 31 workers at Hospital Metropolitano de Cabo Rojo in Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico, voted 14-17 against unionization with the ULEES. 2 workers at Prime Communications Retail, a subcontracted AT&T store in Montgomery, Alabama, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 174 workers at Capital City Public Charter School in Washington, D.C., voted 140-34 in favor of unionization with AFT, Local 1927. 8 workers at Liberty Mobile in Guaynabo, Puerto Rico, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the CWA. 20 workers at Spirit Lex in Creve Coeur, Missouri, voted 8-8 with 3 challenged ballots back in November in their union election. So the challenged ballots were determinative. So the NLRB investigated and determined that the challenged ballots were eligible voters. The votes were counted, and it put the union over the top. So the workers are now union with IAMAW District Lodge 9. Workers at Southern Glazers Wine and Liquor Distribution have unionized with Teamsters Local 667 in Memphis, Tennessee, after the company voluntarily recognized the union. In a statement, the Teamsters said, "We intend to raise them to the standard the Teamsters have set in the Memphis market." In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, even though the UAW lost the election at Mercedes in Vance, Alabama, their charges against the company in Germany still stand. And if the company is found to have broken the German law demanding that they remain neutral in union elections in other countries, they will be fined at 2% of their global revenue, not profits, their global revenue, which will be a big hit, an estimated 3 billion euros or 3.27 billion US dollars. In strikes and bargaining updates, the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, signed an agreement with the TSA that the union is calling historic, with the union securing increased uniform allowances, a streamlined grievance and arbitration process, and an increased say for workers. Still on strike, 3 months later, Teamsters spoke out against the company's refusal to bargain at Molson Coors' annual shareholder meeting. Since the Teamsters have been on strike, Molson Coors CEO Gavin D. Hattersley has made $2.9 million. Since the last contract, the Coors family have earned over $100 million in dividends. Meanwhile, the company continues to insult its workers with an offer of 99 cents an hour. CWA members at New Flyer in Anniston, Alabama, ratified a new contract by 99%, with pay increases between 15% and 38% through the end of the contract in 2026. Restrictions on forced overtime, expanded vacation and paid time off, improved parental leave, the addition of Juneteenth as a holiday, guaranteed cost of living adjustments, and enhanced retirement benefits. This comes after the company voluntarily recognized the union in January. In a new analysis of data from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration by the AFL-CIO's Strategic Organizing Center, it was revealed that Amazon continues to fail to keep its employees safe. Specifically, Amazon promised to cut injury rates by 50% by 2025. So far, they have only cut injury rates by 2%. The company reports a serious injury every 14 minutes in 2023 and was responsible for over 50% of all serious injuries in warehouses in the entire country. Further, these are likely undercounts, as OSHA reports that Amazon's company doctors send injured workers back to the floor without reporting injuries. Bad news continued for Amazon, with the University of Chicago releasing a new study finding that over the last 3 months, 53% of Amazon workers experienced food insecurity. 48% of Amazon workers experienced housing insecurity, and 56% of Amazon workers haven't been able to pay all of their bills. Boeing locked out 125 firefighters to coerce them into accepting an unfair contract. The Northern Virginia AFL-CIO is rallying to support the workers. AFGE is condemning the proposed 2% pay increase for federal employees in President Biden's recently released budget, while applauding other parts of the budget, like proposed increases for the budget of the Social Security Administration, the VA, the USDA, and more. In politics and legislation, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission released a new rule last week aimed at encouraging more large-scale transmission projects amid a slump of new construction of these projects by utility companies, even as new manufacturing and data centers, which are extremely energy-hungry beasts, are being stood up all over the country. Even as Shelby County, Alabama residents face the cost of extreme increases to the cost of housing, median home prices shot up from $272,000 at the start of 2017 to almost $400,000 in February, and median rent is over $1,300 a month versus $913 a month for the state. Brian Lyman at the Alabama Reflector pointed out that their legislators spent their legislative session focused on policing libraries and high school sports. In Shiloh, Alabama, the construction of a highway caused severe flooding on residents' property. Construction continued and completed despite residents voicing concerns during the process. And rather than fix the issue, the state gave these residents small settlements and attached a restriction on the deed of the property, stating that owners could never take legal action against the state over the issue, including future owners. The residents claimed they were not made aware that this restriction was being placed on their deeds. Alabama politicians think we are too stupid to rank things, so they banned ranked choice voting. More than 80 organizations sent a letter to Governor Ivey urging immediate action to close Alabama's health care coverage gap, and the Supreme Court upheld the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's funding structure, 7-2. That is it for Last Week in Southern Labor this week. If we missed anything, you can make a submission at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it on the next roundup. We're going to be right back and break down what happened at Mercedes in Vance, Alabama. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603 3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPACT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
To go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Adam Keller is out today, so I am flying solo, but appreciate the support in the box. It is very difficult to do all the tech stuff and all the scene transitions and everything, and so it's very nice having Ben and Jeff back there in the box supporting us, so very appreciative of that. Thanks everybody for tuning in online. We've got about 30 people watching us on YouTube and not as many likes. So if you have not liked this stream and you're watching us on YouTube, then please do go ahead and do that. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. We've got Mel and Joe and Leanne and Leander and Jada and Dwayne. Thank you all very much. Leander from Blount County, Tennessee, saying I made my stand there. I'm not going to be leaving. That's kind of the tack that I take, but like Leander said, it's hard for everyone today, whether you're union or not. I think that there's a lot of broken hearts today. Alabama, Dwayne said that Alabama's SB 231 likely could be challenged under the NLRA's preemption. Yes, I think that it potentially will be challenged. I know that there are some complications with an effort to challenge it, so we'll see what happens. But I know that the lawyers at Jobs to Move America, for instance, are reviewing their options there. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you would like to call or leave us a message if you are listening to us and while we are not live. But, so workers at Mercedes in Vance, Alabama voted against unionization, 56% to 44%. Not a blowout, but certainly not a victory for the union there. Very unfortunate. And so I just wanted to start off by playing Shawn Fain's concession speech, I guess you could call it, because he had a lot of good stuff to say there. So we're going to play that, and we're going to play that in full. Go ahead and play that clip.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Obviously not the result we wanted, but these courageous workers reached out to us because they wanted justice. They led us. They led this fight, and that's what this is all about. And what happens next is up to them. Justice isn't just about one vote or one campaign. It's about getting a voice and getting your fair share. And, workers won serious gains in this campaign. Don't lose sight of that. The UAW bump. They killed wage tiers. They got rid of a CEO that had no interest in improving conditions for these workers. Mercedes is a better place thanks to this campaign and these courageous workers. The company said give the new CEO a chance. And, it's ironic. We've heard this before, and that's exactly what Volkswagen told its workers in 2019. And in 2024, Volkswagen workers realized that it's not about the CEO. It's about a voice on the job. It's about getting our lives back, getting our times back, and having dignity on the job. And the only path to do that, the only vehicle for that, is with a union contract. This company engaged in egregious illegal behavior. The federal government and the German government are currently investigating Mercedes for the intimidation and harassment that they inflicted on their own workers. And we intend to follow that process through. It's a David versus Goliath fight. Sometimes Goliath wins a battle, but ultimately David will win the war. These workers will win their fair share. And we're going to be there every step of the way with them. We've been here before. We know what we're taking on. And this company, like most others, operated off the same playbook of fear, threats, intimidation. Our fight isn't just here. Our fight is in the legislators, in the halls of legislature. 60 million Americans say if they had the opportunity, they would join a union. Why doesn't that happen? When we polled the state of Alabama, when we polled the state of Tennessee, 2-to-1 margin, people said that they sided with the UAW, that they would join the UAW. But we all know, we have weak labor laws in place. Enforcement is a struggle. And sometimes the companies are able to turn those numbers around. And, obviously statistics show one thing, but, with laws and the way the companies violate it, sometimes, we end up on the wrong end of this. But this law stings. While this law stings, tell you this, we're going to keep our heads up, keep our heads held high. These workers have nothing to do but be proud of the efforts they put forth and what they've done. We fought the good fight, and we're going to continue forward. Ultimately, these workers here are going to win. I've lost elections in my life. Most of us have lost elections in our lives. We learn from it and we move forward, and that's what we intend to do. We put everything we had in this fight. We left nothing on the table, so there's no regrets in this fight. And I look at John Wooden, one of my favorite Americans, and I love his pyramid of success. And I look at that, his definition of success. Success is the peace of mind attained through the self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. And these courageous workers, all of them, I know they put every bit of effort they could into this. I know they did the absolute best they could do. And I know they're going to continue to carry this fight on, and they'll hold the company accountable. And, and I'll end with this quote from John Wooden because it's one of my favorites. Success is never final. Failure is never fatal, but it's courage that counts. And that's what matters here. These workers are courageous in what they've done. But the success we've had, it's easy to come in and have press conferences when we win everything we do. That's the easy press conference. But let me assure you, this isn't a failure. This isn't fatal. This is a bump in the road. We've been here before, and we're going to continue on, and we're going to win. And so we'll be back in Vance. I assured the company that before I walked out the door and shook their hand, and I think we'll have a different result down the road, and I look forward to that. So, I just want to take my hats off to all these courageous workers and what they've done. They led this fight. It's all about them. I say this over and over. This isn't about me. What we do is not about me. It's about bringing justice and dignity to working class people all over this nation and all over this globe. That's what the battle is. The runaway inequality, the runaway wealth inequality in this nation. 3 families in America have as much wealth as the bottom 50%. That is criminal, people. We have a crisis in this nation, and the only way we fix that crisis is by standing up together and becoming united as a working class. And we're going to continue on. So, again, not the result we wanted today, But I'm very proud of these workers. We keep our heads up and we march on. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So there you go. Really great speech from Shawn Fain as usual there. And, you know, just to elaborate on some of the things that he mentioned, I mean, it was a loss, and, you know, I don't want to understate that or to pretend that it's not a loss. But it's also a reality that 2,000 workers in Vance, Alabama, working at Mercedes want a union. That's a fact. 2,000 workers. And those 2,000 workers won real gains for themselves and their coworkers. Real gains that would not have happened but for the union election. And I don't think anybody disputes that. They got serious raises. Would not have happened without the union election. They ended two-tier. Would not have happened without the union election. Supplemental employees got to come on as full-time permanent workers. Would not have happened without the union election. Got rid of a bad CEO. They fired their boss. Would not have happened without a union election. Would not have happened without those 2,000 workers who want a union. None of those things happened because they sat around and trusted their boss, trusted that their employer would take care of them. That's not how it happened. It happened because they stood up and said, we're going to demand more, and we want to do that through unionization. None of that stuff would have happened without it. None of that stuff happened through one-on-one meetings with their boss. None of that happened with one-on-one meetings with their representatives, with their legislators, with company preachers in Tuscaloosa. That's not how they won raises or got rid of two-tier or fired their boss. They did it through a union campaign. Adam wanted to make sure that I relayed that he echoed those sentiments. He said in a note, quote, "It is remarkable just how powerful the opposition can be to peel off such support. But on the flip side, it is remarkable how far the workers have come in the face of such opposition." The UAW says they're investing $40 million in new organizing, and hopefully that includes a fair amount in Alabama and the South. We need that kind of investment to turn the tide, and not just from the UAW, but from the entire labor movement. Every union should be looking at their budget and looking at their priorities and see how they can support new organizing in the South and how they can inoculate folks against the onslaught of anti-union propaganda from outside third parties and from bosses inside of workplaces. And that's going to require real investment in labor media. Beyond media, popular education and training is a must. Supposedly, there are about 150,000 union members in Alabama, and we need every one of them to be an evangelist for this movement if we're going to overcome the bosses and the politicians that are arrayed against us. And we need associative power through community, faith, nonprofit, and other connections. We need people power, bottom line, if we're going to make progress and begin to change these conditions that we're facing as working people in the South. So that's Adam's message. And, you know, just to elaborate on the anti-union campaign, I don't think I have ever, just talking to the workers yesterday, I don't know that I've ever heard of as extensive a propaganda campaign from the employers as what happened at Mercedes. The new CEO himself said that the new CEO himself, according to at least one worker, was walking around the shop floor constantly and said that the worker said that the new CEO probably himself talked to 4,000 workers I mean, that is insane kind of stuff. And that's on top of, again, they got a company preacher running around talking to people. They had these third-party anti-union, union-busting consultants constantly coming and pulling people off of the floor. In mandatory meetings, they were not allowed to not attend these meetings, and some of the meetings were as short as 20 minutes. Some of them were as long as an hour and a half, bombarding them with anti-union talking points. And you have to, even if you consider yourself anti-union, you have got to recognize that that is not a fair election. It's just simply not. The employer had complete and unfettered access consistently and constantly to the employees, and the union and their supporters did not. And it seems like, from folks that I've talked to, that has been the new CEO was a really big turning point in the campaign. It seems like the workers were feeling really good up until about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and that's when the tide really started to shift. So, really disappointing results. They hurt, and they hurt a lot. But again, those 2,000 workers won real gains for themselves and their coworkers, and the ones that I talked to said that they're not going to be giving up the fight. So we're going to be seeing more from them in the future, I'm sure. To talk some more about the election and some of his thoughts after having spent a week in Alabama, we've got Luis Leon from Labor Notes, friend of the show and excellent labor reporter. Really, if you're only going to be reading one person about the UAW's campaign to organize the non-union auto sector, it does need to be Luis and Labor Notes, because he's by far been the best that I've been reading on this, the most consistent and the most well-sourced. It's just really been great stuff, so definitely check out his work in Labor Notes. Luis, welcome back to the show. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
So I don't know if you've been listening to the program up to now, but I've been talking about some of the campaign against the union from the company, and of course there was an enormous campaign from outside of the company, from the business and political class. But it does seem like, I just didn't hear a lot of that. Just talking about the outside campaign first, from the business class, the politicians and things like this, I did not hear that referenced very much by the workers themselves. Of course, in every single news piece, they always mention it, and they always mention it as a big thing. But talking to the workers, I did not. I don't even know if I can recall a single worker saying that, oh, this was a really big part of the reason that folks ended up voting no. But you were able to talk to more workers over the last week than I was. So what was your perception of the workers' reaction to that campaign from the BCA and the politicians?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think the impact of political interference from Alabama's political and economic class is pretty much creating an environment where workers are just so exhausted and tired and want it to be over. Think about in the political arena when you're in a primary fight or a presidential fight, and in the run up to the election, things get really intense. A lot of folks, unless you're a partisan of one side, people just tune out. They just give up. Can this be over? So I think it has an impact in terms of the global effect of like, what are we, can this just end? So it just exhausts people. People just want it to be over. And I think that's what we saw in terms of where there was more from workers that I talked to at shift change, from workers that I talked to in the run up to the vote. The impact that I heard was most profound was when the Reverend Matthew Wilson visited the plant, and when the company fired the previous CEO, Michael Cobble and Goebel, I'm sorry, Michael Goebel, and brought in a new guy. So it's a classic union busting tactic, and it's a classic because it works. So that's what workers said. I think another factor to highlight here is that unlike the Volkswagen campaign, where we can say that was burnt turf, right? Like they had two previous campaigns plant-wide and a third campaign that they won for a micro unit. In those two plant-wide campaigns, the workers got to see on full display the union busting campaign. They got to see all the tricks. The workers at Mercedes, unfortunately, didn't have that. Murmurs of organizing picked up again in the wake of the pandemic. Workers started talking about a union in 2021, around the time of the Bessemer campaign at Amazon. And then things really picked up in 2022. But they only got to 20% support. And then things just stagnated. So thinking about that as your benchmark of comparison, workers definitely, built up a base of support of 2,000 workers. They were public. This was not a campaign where you had 2 or 3 spokespeople. As you yourself know, you went into the union hall and you saw workers, worker leaders talking about their strategy, talking about how they're talking to their coworkers in their department. So this was definitely a worker-led campaign. There was definitely momentum on their side. They were fed up. They were angry. There was strategy from the UAW organizers in terms of comm support. But when you're up against the economic and political class of Alabama and outside of Alabama, all eyes are on you. It's a lot. And despite incredible organizing and incredible fighters like Jeremy Kimbrell, Detrick Lewis, Deborah Sandifer, Moesha Chandler, Robert Lett, there's so many workers. And the reason why I'm naming these folks is because that's what's different about this campaign. That's what's so inspiring about it, is that workers put themselves out there on the line to fight for a union. And whenever anyone steps out into the arena to organize, we have to commend them for that, because the path of least resistance is to keep your head down, especially when everything around you is set up against you. So they have, these workers, the opposition leveled against them was some of it predictable. In all union fights, they do this. But some of it was a little, we hadn't seen in a long time. Like we had not seen a pastor basically come in and preach the gospel of the company.
To workers individually, like one-on-one, going up and tapping them on the shoulder, whispering to them. I mean, that is kind of bizarre. And so you said that had a profound impact, you feel like. What were some of the workers saying about experiencing that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some people laughed it off, right? So I think it's a plan of 5,000 people. It was something that people registered. Maybe I shouldn't say profound. Don't want to give Reverend Wilson too much credit, lest he gets a GLS SUV out of this. So I think it had an impact because basically you had someone that had unfettered access to the shop floor that can go in one-on-one and talk to you about, make promises, tell you, I know, like the fact that everyone refers to the new CEO by his first name as though he's, a pal, give Federico a chance, and it sounds like a cool name too. Like, Federico is not like, I don't know, let me not go there with the German Nazi names, but it's I think it's just one of the things in the arsenal that starts chipping away at the support. As you know, Jacob, as yourself a trade unionist, when you file for an election, let's say you file with majority support plus 50%, right, of the plant. a lot of what happens and what the employer tries to do is by any means necessary to chip away at that support bit by bit, until they completely destroy the drive, right? So you think in the scope of everything that happened, in the scope of the captive audience meetings, the letter from the new CEO, the day that voting started on Monday, May 13th, basically saying, give me another chance. All of those things, they just start to accumulate and start to kind of reduce that momentum that workers have. And it starts to cast doubt on, should we do this? And then it seeds confusion and fear. So, and then you have a religious figure come in and kind of pull people aside and whisper into their ears about, this may not be the best decision for you right now. Despite the paternalism of telling a worker on the line that he knows best, it does register. So it's the cumulative effect, so much more so than like one individual factor. And I mean, another factor is that some of the workers that I talked to, they mentioned that there were 2 places where support started to slip. So that was around people that have preferred jobs. So the preferred jobs are people that work in material handlers and folks that do quality control. So some of these workers, their jobs are, in comparison to the workers on the line, they're a little bit easier. And in a union shop, those jobs are bid for, and usually they go to workers that have seniority, right? Which is as they should. Imagine you put into a plant 25, 30 years. You shouldn't be, screwing thousands of nuts on the line, break when you already have had rotator cuff tears. At that point, the company should take care of you, and you should be able to have a less arduous job assignment, right? What ends up happening with one of the grievances that workers had at Mercedes is that the group leaders would have what was called group leader discretion, meaning that they will give those jobs to their buddies or the people that were kissing the company's ass. Those were the ones that would get those jobs. So I think support there was a little shaky, just because of where they stood in terms of the workplace. And then you had folks, I spoke to a young woman who had been at Mercedes for 2 years, and she told me, this is a good job for now, but my ultimate goal is to go into nursing. So I'm not even bothering to vote, So, which is something that kind of reminded me when I covered the Amazon campaign in Bessemer, where I heard from the younger workers that, some of them were basically seeing Amazon on the company's terms, like this is a short-term thing, and then I'm out. Obviously, Mercedes is a different type of employer. There was a core group of people that had been there for decades. And so that's a different factor, but you still have some of these newer folks that came on. Some of them were pro-union, some of them were not. So I think that those are 2 areas that I would point to, because ultimately going into the vote, people knew that it was going to be close. But there was a sense that they had talked to enough people and were, had tallied up their supporters and had an assessment that they could win. So there was definitely that sense of like, yeah, we're going to win. It's going to be close, but we're going to win. So what ended up happening is that they actually lost some of their supporters, right? So the key question is like, was that attrition attributed to the CEO? What promises did that man make? Because he himself walked the floor. You think of a new CEO, you think they're in meetings with higher ups, but no, this guy was actually behaving like an organizer. He was going through the plant, having one-on-ones with people. He spoke to thousands of workers one-on-one. So at this
I don't
plant,
think I've ever heard of that before. I don't think I've ever heard of a new CEO. I mean, obviously the new CEO, that's like a common trick, but I don't think I've ever heard of the new CEO coming down and personally talking to thousands of workers. I mean, that's bizarre.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's an indication of how scared they were, right? They were really scared that the workers, and it shows that they had reason to be scared, right? They have half of their workforce is pro-union.
Right.
What is Monday going to look like?
Right.
Is this company going to start retaliating against these workers that stood up courageously? They better not, because they're still going to continue organizing and the UAW is not going away. This is just a setback, and their leadership will only grow from this. They will only learn from this experience. And 1 year from now, it will be within their power to file again for an election. And I was at the Mercedes-Benz training center after when observers from both sides were there. And at one point, the new CEO came up, to Shawn Fain, and Shawn Fain told him, this isn't over. The workers are going to come back, and we're going to be there right behind them. And the new CEO said, I know. So they're not taking any they're not hazarding any guess about what the future will hold. They know that they have an empowered workforce, and those workers already won a $2 pay increase. They already eliminated wage tiers. They fired a CEO. So this already tells you how much you can accomplish when you are organized. What they need now is a collective bargaining agreement, so that whatever changes their organization wins them as workers, it's in writing, so it can be taken away when times change, because they will be taken away.
Right, and that's an important thing to underscore, is that yes, these workers won a lot, and they won a lot not because they had open door meetings with the boss and they asked nicely and the boss is such a nice guy. They got these gains because they stood up and said, we're going to unionize. That's how they got these gains, but every single one of them can be taken away tomorrow. Every single one of them. None of it is guaranteed. None of it's in writing. None of it's binding. Every single one of these is at the whim of the employer, and they can be taken away just as easily and as quickly as they were won. And I want to talk about that a little bit, but going back to, losing support, one of the things that they talked about in the campaign, the workers, and their strategy was, and this is, again, like a lot of this for folks who have covered other union elections and who have seen stuff like this, a lot of it's very common and good strategy, both from the company and from the workers, right? And so one of the things that the workers talked about having done is they found leaders in different parts of the company to try to get them to bring along their departments, basically, right? And so Jeremy was talking about yesterday how, in the last week, in the last 10 days, some of these people who had previously been supportive and who had previously, their departments were 100% because they had these natural leaders who were leading everybody to, vote for the union. They stopped hearing back from these leaders. And so it seems like there's kind of an understanding or a guess that there was a real concerted effort, not just to talk to each worker individually, but that they were thinking like organizers and trying to talk to these leaders, whether they're group leaders or natural leaders, and get them to flip their entire departments. Were you able to learn anything more about that effort specifically from the company to flip leaders and get them to flip the rest of their coworkers?
Yeah. I spoke to Brett Garrard, who's been at the company for about 20 years, and he talked that he himself was hauled into one of these meetings with one of the company honchos, and basically grilled about the union, right? So, Brett is a veteran, like a Marine veteran, literally, but also a veteran of previous organizing efforts, and he could see through the bullshit, right? So he was what I would call like one of the members of the core organizing committee. Because the plan is so big, one of the things that Jeremy and others decided early on is that there was going to be a loose structure in terms of like leadership, right? So some of the folks that were in leadership positions in the organizing drive are just people that organically emerged, right? And some of those folks may not have had as much experience with like a boss fight. And when that happened, it seems like it did put fear into their hearts, and they flipped. The union obviously knew that stuff like that was going to happen, right? But how intense it was, how fast it was for 2 weeks, I think it did take the organizing committee by surprise, from what I heard from Jeremy in particular. They did do inoculation. Actually, Jacob Ryan, one of the leaders, went to the Labor Notes conference, to the workshop on inoculation, where you basically prepare inoculations when you prepare your coworkers against what the company will do and say, so that they are not surprised when they pull the classic hits of union busting. So yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a factor. And like you said, I think you're right on the money to say that they were effective organizers in kind of mapping. I think all boss fights actually do this, but people don't always register it, right? Like the captive audience meetings, in addition to just being a psych ops operation, they are also opportunities for the boss to map, like, who are the leaders. So the people that stand up and are confrontational, they see, okay, these are the public supporters. And then they start, to track that and see, okay, who do they associate with? And that's how they start to kind of break up the networks of support within the plant. So the boss, cannot be like underestimated in the sense that they understand that they want to be the rulers and the workers to be the ruled. And they will do anything that they can to preserve that control. So I often describe the workplace as a dictatorship. So imagine if you're living under a dictatorship and the boss has all this access to you. They can bring you into meetings. In the mornings before they start working on the line, they have these startup meetings. So what Mercedes did during these startup meetings is that they actually try to poison people's minds. Instead of talking about health concerns or anything, production goals for the day, they were union busting during that time, right? So that's the kind of access that the company has. And while these workers are working 10-hour shifts, they can hardly go on vacation. Federico had all the time in the world to just walk the plant and talk to workers, right?
Yeah.
So here's where you get at the fundamentally unequal terrain that workers are operating in. So I think that you are absolutely right that the boss, did that and did it to great effect. I mean, I don't want to give also too much credit. There were other things that the boss did that I think are really dumb. Like I think the Wilson ploy, bringing in the Reverend, some workers, the union supporters definitely, laughed it off. And I think this person was not an effective communicator because it created a crisis for him, after tarnishing Dr. King, in one of the states that is known throughout the world as like the birthplace of like civil rights, of the civil rights struggle. So there were a couple of more than a couple of missteps on the company side. But again, I think it's just about the war environment that they want to create. And as a whole, it just puts workers in a place where they feel like, I am in a dictatorship, I have to submit. And workers submitted because that was the message. Like, we call the shots. That's what the company, we can bring in a reverend to talk to you. We can actually, suspend like our startup meetings. We're so concerned about production and cranking out 450 cars. But for the sake of busting this union, we're going to stop all of that. So it just gives people a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking to Luis Leon from Labor Notes. Just a reminder, we're on the radio, just regarding language and things like that. But you were talking about some of the. I had one more question about the anti-campaign, and there were some. At least one of the right-wing rags in the state said that one of the things that potentially pushed workers away from the union was the drama between the union and Nick Saban and UA and the lawsuit that Tuscaloosa is threatening against the union for use of their trademark and quote unquote misrepresenting Nick Saban's words, which were obviously not misrepresented. They're it's very clear what he was saying, and so that just seems like a bizarre thing to believe to me. But again, you were able to talk to more folks. Did that ever come up?
No, I mean, I think it came up when Nick Saban first visited the plant, that workers, I mean, one worker told me it was a nothing burger in terms of describing what it was. I mean, he was vague in his remarks. In terms of, going back to the union busting like playbook, I think folks are going to seize on anything, right, to cast doubt, to create confusion. So I think in this instance, that's an example of that. I think that ultimately, with what Nick Saban said was public, as you mentioned. So it was not like it was misused or anything like that. Like that's those are public statements that he made in support of unions. Right. And yeah, so yeah, I didn't really hear that. I think what I heard the most was just people feeling like they were just tired and wanted it all to end. That's which I've heard before, like when you get to the end of a campaign like this, right? It's just like workers feel like they're being bombarded, like there's like a war and they're just being bombarded with stuff and they just want it to stop, so that was the effect of it. So when you can bring in outside interest to kind of spread those messages, it just contributes to it. So that's how I would interpret that.
Right. So the last question that I have is, you and I know it's obvious, and I think it's obvious to anybody that kind of sits down and thinks about it for a second. These workers, again, they won, real and significant gains in this union campaign. But again, only because of the union campaign. They would not have eliminated two-tier if they did not have this campaign to unionize. They would not have gotten that raise if they had not had this campaign to unionize. None of these things would have happened through an open-door policy, talking, playing nice with the boss. None of that would have happened without the campaign. And yet, the workers who voted against the union, they saw all of this. They saw the new CEO, and they said, I want to give this a chance, right? Was there any recognition among the no voters of that reality, that these things would not have happened without the union campaign, that none of the things that everybody was upset about, that everybody was concerned about, none of those things would have changed without the campaign?
Yeah, that's a good point. Ironically, I think some of them credit it, like imagine if you've been, let's say you hired in 2 years ago, and then you start seeing progressively, like once the workers reach 30% in February, the company, announces that they're going to do profit sharing. They're going to eliminate two-tier. If you're not like a pro-labor person that's kind of plugged into the big three strike and all these other things that are happening in the world that have strengthened labor's hand, you might think, oh, wow, the company's doing great. Now, if your timeline is 20 years, you have seen how things have changed. You have seen how you used to have, the money that the company gave you for the Mercedes clothes that you have to wear on the line used to be more. When you used to see that there was a night schedule from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. that allowed parents to basically, drop their kids off at school, pick them up, have that family time. Your experience is not, if you've only been at the company for 2 years, your experience is not so much one of the company taking things away as it is one of the company making concessions. So how the company came to make those concessions doesn't really register in some of the anti-union workers' minds. But for a worker that's been there a little longer, they know that their experience at the plant has been one of the company just grinding them down and taking away things. So I think that's the way that I kind of heard it when I spoke to workers. And then there were others that would say, we just want to give the CEO a chance. And if things don't work out, then we can bring the union back, Right. So they kind of saw the union as like, okay, the union campaign is going to help us in terms of extracting these concessions. But the other part of that, the fact that those concessions can also be taken away as easily as they can be given away if they're not bargained over in a contract, that other piece didn't, register as much. There were some folks that also didn't have, a lot of experience with unions. In terms of southern states, I think Alabama is at 8.6, 8.7 in terms of its workers that are members of unions. But some of these workers didn't have familiarity, with unions. And I think there is something to be said about, as much as we love the labor movement, as much as we want positive coverage of the labor movement, in Alabama, is not, besides the great work that you are doing, Jacob, and others, there's just not that many pro-worker voices out there that are talking about ceding some power to workers on the shop floor, so that there's a democracy and not this dictatorship that I described. And I think that that has an impact, right? So that's something that I'd be curious to hear more about, like what was people's understanding really of unions and the labor movement beyond the core organizers that obviously were following the Big Three strike. For the majority of the folks that were supporters, what was their sense of a union?
Right. Yeah, well, I'm sure that we'll that more of that will come out over the coming days, and look forward to doing what we can to continue educating folks about unions and unionization. But it's a real problem that you've identified. I mean, AL.com, the biggest news site, the biggest news source in the entire state, the person who covers labor for them is the business reporter, right? I mean, it's just such a farce. And again, AL.com, on in conservative spaces is considered a socialist rag, right? But they have a business reporter covering labor stuff, who doesn't understand the NLRA. I mean, there's been procedural issues that I've seen in his reporting that he just doesn't. I mean. And which is not to say that I think he's malicious necessarily, but he just doesn't know, right? He just doesn't know, and that's a problem. That even if you're, it would be better to just have neutral reporters who understand anything about labor and unions and worker power and things like this. And we just don't have that. There's a new reporting intern at the Alabama Political Reporter that I'm excited about. He's been doing some good stuff, so hopefully he'll continue to do good worker reporting. But yeah, it's a real problem. Luis Leon from Labor Notes. Anything else before we let you go?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a setback, and I think we have to continue backing up these workers.
That's right. Folks... I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you about Hyundai. Yeah, I know that you're in contact with some workers from Hyundai, and I think yesterday you said that you had heard from some of them. How have they been reacting, and has this had any effect on their campaign that you can tell so far?
No, I mean, I think they're all committed. I mean, this is the thing. The UAW has receive a surge of cards. The momentum has not stalled because of this. Workers still are fed up. They still want to change their workplace. The question is, are they going to talk to their coworkers and get to that 30%, 50%, 70%? Because basically it's in their hands where they want to take this, right? This is what the UAW has emphasized. So the playbook at Mercedes will be revised, updated, and workers will share it with one another. So what I can say is that the Hyundai workers are talking to the Mercedes workers. The Mercedes workers in Alabama are talking to the ones in South Carolina, the ones at BMW in South Carolina. So this is a movement, and it's not going to stop. It's going to continue. And once workers realize that they have the power, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle.
Luis Leon from Labor Notes, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a win in Alabama. That's right. 600 workers at New Flyer in Anniston, Alabama, just ratified a new contract that contains significant double-digit raises. It was in the same week as the loss at Mercedes, so it's been kind of drowned out. But I want to give that story some attention because it's a good story, and it's another illustration of worker power and how it can be used to improve working conditions in Alabama and in the South. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host Adam Keller is out today, so I'm flying solo, but really appreciate the support of Jeff and Ben in the box. So much easier to do this when you're not having to figure out all the technical stuff while you're trying to talk and trying to figure out what you want to say during an interview, what you want to say, or what questions to ask, or, it's just so much easier doing this than having to do all of it at the same time. So really appreciate that. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you want to call in. We also have a chat. We have a chat in Facebook and on YouTube. You can chat with us if you would like in there. So appreciate everybody who's doing so. Over in Anniston, Alabama, workers at New Flyer have won a contract. They have won a new contract for 600 workers. They ratified that contract by about 99%. Fascinating, a really, really encouraging vote ratifying that contract. So really excited for them there. The contract includes a lot of stuff. The workers on average are going to be receiving between a 25 and 38% raise, not over 4 or 5 years like we see in some of these other contracts, but by 2026. So at maximum, we're talking about 2.5 years. A 25% raise at the low end over 2.5 years. That is huge, life-changing amounts of money, only possible through unionization. This was also, this is a years-long fight that unions and labor and community groups have been having with New Flyer. In California, they were doing some, they were doing some illegal stuff, and they were able to get unions and Jobs to Move America were able to get a settlement with New Flyer, where New Flyer agreed that in union campaigns at non-union New Flyer manufacturing facilities all across the country, they would remain neutral and voluntarily recognize the union. And so that's what they did in Anniston. They remained neutral. The majority of workers, the supermajority of workers supported the union. So they got their union. They began negotiating a contract immediately, and in less than 3 months. Is that right? February, March, April. In a little over 3 months, they came to an agreement and the workers ratified it. I mean, that is a model of cooperative relations with your employees. That is a model of cooperative relations with your employees that you are you don't see in a lot of other places because because employers do not want to cede power to their workers. They don't want to have to negotiate across the bargaining table with them as equals. They don't want to, They just like being able to run their little dictatorships and not have to answer to anybody. But New Flyer is taking a more collaborative approach to labor relations, and they are not fighting their workers who want to unionize. They are not fighting their workers seriously in this contract campaign. And so, like I said, 25 to 38% raises over 2.5 years. Life-changing amounts of money. And that's not all, because, of course, we understand that union contracts come with a lot of other things, including just cause disciplinary procedures in every single workplace across the state and really across the country. You can be fired for any reason or no reason at all as long as it's not illegal. That is an absurd state of affairs, especially when you start to think about how long some people work at companies, right? If you have been working for a corporation for 20 or 30 years, it is an absurd and fundamentally unfair and frankly illegitimate state of affairs that after 30 years of sacrificing the best 30 years of your life, right? I mean, 18 to 48, you are never going to be in better shape than you are for those years. And a lot of people sacrifice those years to one company. And then at the end of all of that, if you do not have a union contract, your company still doesn't owe you anything. They don't owe you anything. They can fire you. They can discipline you for any reason or no reason at all. Any reason or no reason at all, unless you have a union contract that contains just cause disciplinary procedures, right? And so they were able to win that. No more arbitrary discipline or termination. There are restrictions on forced overtime now. There's expanded vacation and paid time off. There is improved parental leave. They got the addition of Juneteenth as a paid holiday. They got guaranteed cost of living adjustments. Guaranteed cost of living adjustments. That's another thing that we have in workplaces across the country. The risk of inflation is placed on the employees. That is where you see the risk of inflation. Because if you don't have a union contract, again, you are not guaranteed a set schedule of raises year over year over year. It is all, again, at the boss's discretion. So every year when inflation increases, 2 to 3% devaluation of the dollar, that all of that risk, all of that cost is borne by the employees. So on top of the 25 to 35% raises, they were able to secure cost of living adjustments to help share the risk of inflation between the workers and the employers. That is an enormous, enormous win for the workers. They also got enhanced retirement benefits. So, really across the board, a great contract. And, ratified by 99.39%. That is huge. You do not typically see ratification of contract results like that. 86% is a good ratification result. 99% is just, is really, really astounding. In a press release on the contract win, Ryan Masters, a worker at New Flyer, expressed the positive impact that the contract is going to have on his family, stating that the contract is going to give my family the financial freedom that we have longed for in order to rest easy for once. I now have the option to roll over my vacation to be able to spend more quality time with my children and witness the pivotal moments in their young lives. To me, this contract will change everyone's life for the better. Another worker, Shannon Franks, expressed gratitude for the transformative impact, saying the new contract means better pay, and now that there are improved retirement contributions from the company, I will have a better future. It's truly a blessing. Our union and the hard-fought pay increase will help improve our lives here in Alabama. All Alabama workers deserve the same benefits and a safe work environment. Another worker at New Flyer in Alabama, Marcus King, said, I think this will put New Flyer on the map as one of the better paying jobs in the area. With the union now in place, it'll also make it a great place to work. The union will bring equality and a safer environment for us workers. This is the beginning of a legacy that will last for generations. I am proud to have been part of getting this started. The CWA said that the successful unionization at New Flyer in Anniston, Alabama, represents a beacon of hope for workers across the South, signaling a new era of empowerment and dignity in the workplace. This victory underscores the power of collective action and solidarity in achieving remarkable change. In the past couple of years, almost 1,200 New Flyer employees have unionized with the International Union of Electrical Workers, CWA, at facilities in Anniston, Alabama, Shepherdsville, Kentucky, and Jamestown, New York. They now join 1,200 employees already represented by the CWA at New Flyer's St. Cloud and Crookston, Minnesota assembly plants, and together make up the largest union in public transit bus manufacturing sector in the United States. An increased union presence at New Flyer marks a significant milestone in the ongoing journey towards fair and equitable treatment for all workers at New Flyer. So yeah, really exciting stuff. Carl Kennebrew, president of IUE CWA, said that New Flyer's management has absolutely lived up to the commitments they made in their community benefits agreements. Workers in Jamestown, Shepherdsville, and Anniston have been able to make their own decision without any management interference, which is not what we saw at Mercedes, about whether or not to join the union. We have negotiated a new apprenticeship program and strong collective bargaining agreements so that these are good family-supporting jobs. Really, really exciting news. And, this comes on the heel of more good news for CWA in Alabama, where the CWA in Alabama just unionized the first Alliance Mobile authorized retail store in the country. So AT&T has been trying to subcontract out some of these retail stores to try to get away from union representation. And so at a lot of the retail stores, you'll notice that there are that they're not actually quote unquote AT&T stores. There are these different subcontracted retail stores. And so in Montgomery, it's called Prime Mobile. In CWA Local 3908, unionized Prime Mobile in Montgomery. So that's, really, really exciting news. They unionized, Mary Frisson, a store employee, say, I can officially now say I'm a proud member of the CWA. I hope our first Prime AR retail location in the country win inspires and encourages other AR retail locations to fight and win like we did. So really exciting stuff out of the CWA, both at New Flyer and at these subcontracted AT&T retail locations. So yeah, really exciting stuff. And even with the bad news, even after the bad news at Mercedes, there's still a lot of things happening positive for the labor movement for workers in Alabama and in the United States. So that is going to wrap it up for us today on the first half of the program. If you're listening to us on the radio, you may or may not know that we have a whole second half of the program that is not online only. The second half of the program now also airs later in the week on WMMT in Whitesburg, Kentucky, but it is primarily online. In the second half of the show, we are going to be talking to IFPTE Local 777 President Colin Smy about some new policies from the Corps of Engineers in Chicago that don't seem super great regarding enforcement or lack thereof, as we're going to come to find out about the Clean Water Act. So we're going to talk about some of that. We're also going to be talking, we're going to get to Boss Watch since we didn't get to that in the first half of the program. We're also going to take a look at UAW Local 869 in Michigan, who have authorized a strike over health and safety issues at their Stellantis plant. And we're going to take your calls. If you want to call in right now, I'll take calls at the top of the second half of the program. If we have calls at the beginning, 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. One more time, 844-899-8857. 8857 is the phone number. Appreciate everybody tuning in. If you want to find us online, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm. You can make a one-time or monthly recurring contribution at tvlr.fm/donate. You can buy our logo cap at tvlr.fm/store. With all that out of the way, if you don't hang out with us in the second half of the show, we will see you next week. All right. Off the radio now. Appreciate everybody tuning in and staying tuned. Like I said, we've got a great second half of the show lined up for you today. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned, folks. It's going to be a great show. Call in 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857, and see you on the other side. Short break.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857. We have a caller on the line from an 818 area code. Let's bring them on the air. 818 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, Jacob. This is Lenny Powers from Southern California.
Lenny from Southern California. What's on your mind?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just wanted to go ahead and address the Mercedes unionization efforts down in the South. I just want to, lend some words of encouragement to our, to the workers out there. Don't give up. This is just one battle in a longer war, and Southern workers do deserve dignity and the protections of a union contract, and I'm sure you guys are going to get that sooner than later. Just keep up the fight. Another thing I wanted to mention in regard to that, as workers, we have to understand the concessions that the bosses make, outside of a contract are just handshake agreements and words. Nothing that's outside of a contract. You're not really gaining much, considering those things could be just taken away. There's no inherent protection there or legal protection. So I think that it's all been laid out and understood. But it's just really important to kind of understand that even in a micro perspective, if you're working outside of a contract and the boss is making any type of promises without legal protection of a contract, those are just well wishes and nice words. So yeah, I just wanted to express that, and then also another topic that I wanted to bring up, which has been somewhat of a contentious topic within my union. I'm a member of SEIU. Don't feel real comfortable giving out my local, but
sure. In regard to the issue of Palestine, I don't know how much coverage or how many conversations you had around this on the program. I've been a little bit busy myself, not tuning in, but I just wanted to, outside of the moral arguments and the arguments in regard to just the brutality and the loss of life, and innocent women and children, civilians being essentially slaughtered in Gaza. To connect this to the broader labor focused or kind of like dial it in and make it more labor centric. When you want to bring this issue across to another individual that may have are undecided on in regard to the whole situation, or even hold a passive pushback type of view in regard to this whole conflict, is that who's generally impacted the most in regard to just any type of conflict and war is working class folks. We're not talking about the elites here. We're not talking about millionaires and billionaires, children dying in the streets. We're talking about just everyday working class poor folk that just have the bad luck of being caught in the middle of this global conflict. And I like to say as workers we gotta literally think about putting ourselves in the shoes of those individuals and saying, hey, there's larger forces, there's governments that are making these decisions on our behalf, on either side. So that when we frame these issues within our own locals and within our own unions to pass language in regard to resolutions for ceasefire, we have to understand that the dynamic between those powers and working class folks is that the working class are just subjected to these decisions, and that we really don't have much say without the seat at the table, without having, a labor party, or without having, a working class, party within these government systems. And, just to conclude this, if this does escalate to a, bigger, broader regional war,
where we're going to be having to put more resources in regard to, be more specific in regard to resources. I mean, not only money, but manpower into, the military industrial complex. We're looking at working class folks that are going to be subjected to those, to that call. Nobody that's in the upper, boss class, the capital class. Those individuals don't send their daughters and sons into war. It's all working class folks, and these conflicts are just masking a larger issue regarding the inaffordability of our common goods and our necessities for life, the high cost of shelter, the high cost of food, the high cost of just being able to survive and live, in this country. It's all being veiled behind these moments of where we could send our working class brothers and sisters into war because they have no other options. I mean, we're looking at whether or not you want to barely survive at an Amazon factory or barely survive by putting on a military uniform and enlisting for 4 years. Those decisions, if again this escalates to a bigger and broader conflict, those are going to be working class lives that are going to be lost. So I just wanted to put that perspective out there. It's been a while since I've called in, and I wanted to just lend that view and just see what can we do in regard to us as working class folks to make those connections and better better push that message across to individuals that may be undecided in regards to that position, or maybe even taking the stance of just the mainstream media narrative of how we should be our relationship to this conflict, just from your perspective.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Lenny. Thank you. So coming from a labor standpoint, and we have talked about it on the show a few times, and we've had a couple of interviews about it, and you can find that on our channel if that's something that you're interested in listening to. We talked to UAW Region 9A Director Brandon Mancia about the UAW's call for a ceasefire and them kind of being out front on this issue as a large international union that is engaged in a serious and contentious battle with the non-union auto sector when, and so one of the things I guess at the front is, I'm coming from a labor perspective. I don't really approach a lot of these things as a politics person. I'm not, a member of the Democratic Party. I'm not a member of the Republican Party, certainly, or anything or any organized political party with a ballot line. And so, I come at this from a position of my membership and my leadership in the labor movement. And there are people that ask, why do you in that capacity have a stance on Palestine and Israel? Why is this something that you even talk about? It's not a labor issue. It's not a labor issue, they'll say. And I think that's one of the most absurd things to say. Just to kind of set the table, there is I can't think of a more working class issue than the issue of war, right? I mean, we're talking about a situation where working class people in Israel are conscripted to go and kill working class people in Palestine with the support and tax dollars and products of labor of working class people in the United States. And so therefore it is, if not incumbent, I think it is incumbent on us, but if it is not incumbent, it is at least logical that unions in the United States would take a stance on this issue, because we are the organized bodies of the working class as such. There are other bodies into which the working class are organized, fraternal organizations, churches, things like this, but they are not organizations and bodies of the working class as such. That is the exclusive domain of the labor movement, of unions. And so because this is an issue that is so intimately tied with working class people here and on the other side of the globe, I think it's incumbent on us to have a position on it. We should have a position on it. We should analyze it, and we should figure out what is the best thing for our members, for our countrymen, and for people across the world, because labor should have an internationalist outlook. So, so I think that's the first thing to understand, and that's why unions should take a stance on this. And then, after that, after we get to the point where we should just have a position on this, then, I do think that is where you start going into, these issues about the unjustness of Israel's war and the prosecution of it and the brutal conditions that Palestinians are being subjected to now uniquely, but also, since the creation of the State of Israel, Palestinians have been subjected to second-class existence within the within the borders of Israel and within the borders of Israel's controls of Israel's security control, and so we should not be supporting a regime that is doing the things that Israel is doing. And so you just got to, it's difficult to, I don't know of a magic kind of phrase to get people to, think of it in those terms, to understand that, what Israel is doing is not just. It's just you have to kind of expose people to the realities on the ground, I think, and get them to see what's being done and how intimately we are involved in it as American citizens and as union members. Just for one thing, of course, this doesn't speak to the kind of humanity and all of that, but thinking about the labor that members of my union do, I work on Redstone Arsenal. My labor does not go towards weaponry and military stuff like that. I work in energy, but many of my members do in my union, and it's just so sad to me that the product of their life's work is ultimately destruction, right? I mean, that's just sad. It would be sad to have that be true about your work, right? And I think that I think that people would get more of a sense of purpose. They would feel better about the product of their work if it was productive rather than destructive, right? If instead of building bombs, instead of building rockets, instead of building missiles in Huntsville, if we were, designing bridges, if we were designing roads, if we were, building schools, doing things like this in Huntsville instead of the focus on the weapons industry, I just can't help but think that the workers here would feel better about what they do. I think that a lot of them, they really don't think about what they do, and no doubt there are some of them that kind of feel an affinity for, they've been kind of inculcated into the idea that, what I'm doing is protection and defense, and it's good ultimately. But I just have to believe that even if you're one of those people who think that it's good building bombs and we need it for defense, even if you're one of those people that do think that, and no doubt there are some, that if you were to see the product of your labor, being used in a productive capacity rather than destructive, you would still feel better about it, right? I mean, I can't imagine anybody who would look at a bomb and feel better about having made that than looking at a spaceship to do research on Mars or on the moon, or looking at a school building where children are going to learn and be molded into citizens and well-rounded persons, right? I just can't imagine a person that would look at a bomb and be more fulfilled having built that than the other things, right? And so there's kind of a thing about human, the existence that we have in society that I think broadly, the issue of war kind of speaking more broadly than the issue of Israel and Palestine, I think that's something that I think about a lot. So
So yeah, I don't have anything magic, and I can't say that I've had just a lot of conversations about this with folks, but those would be some of my thoughts, at least, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I completely agree. And you brought up some points and some ways to frame it that I haven't really fleshed out myself, and so I really do appreciate that. And just to add, and this is my last thing, I'm gonna go ahead and jump after this. It's just when we think about our relationship to our work and and how things are framed in regard to scarcity, we really have to understand that we don't really have a resource issue at all. It's the management of those resources that's the issue. And that's why I feel that to seize this moment with the popularity of labor, we really need to start focusing as a collective, and I wish we had better leadership within the AFL-CIO in order to put those resources to work to gain political footing. I think I read a statistic somewhere where it says about 1.6% or so, individuals that are within, any position of government, Congress, Senate, executive branch, even, cabinet positions, those are the 1.6% are working class folk. Like, we really need to strategize, and because the way I see it, even within contracts, you could negotiate a great contract, and you could negotiate for great wages. But on the back end, if you're losing on, say for instance, on the cost of benefits, like what really did you gain? And if you think about it in a grander perspective, if we win, great, unionization campaigns, but our labor laws are getting, whittled down to nothing because we don't have the people, we don't have, working class folks in the position of power that are looking out for those interests, then what are we really gaining in the long run? So I just wanted to leave with that. Jacob, thanks so much for what you guys do. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Lenny in Southern California, appreciate it. And your comment about how it would be nice to have kind of nationwide campaigns about around these issues of production and building things. That's actually going to go really well. Going to be a good segue into our next conversation, because we're going to be talking about that, about what our unions could be doing to encourage production on a nationwide scale. We're going to be talking about that with Colin Smy. Colin Smy is the president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE, Local 777 in Chicago, working at the Corps of Engineers. Colin, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, Colin. Like I said, thanks for coming on, and really excited to talk to you. You've got some not exciting news about the Clean Water Act and its enforcement. But before we get to that, can you talk to us about what you do at your job regarding enforcement of the Clean Water Act and related and related responsibilities around locks and dams and things like this? What do you and your coworkers do over in Chicago?
Yeah, sure thing. So, like Jake said, I represent U.S. Army Corps of Engineers workers. We have a really wide range of folks that do different jobs for the Corps. We've got, of course, engineers and scientists. We have economists and community planners and project managers and all the support staff that it takes to plan things and build things. But of course, we also have folks that are doing work in our communities as well. We've got lock and dam operators that are keeping our navigation system running 24/7, 365. We have park rangers at our lakes that have a recreation component. We have equipment operators that are out there running equipment from cranes to bulldozers to just tractors and things like that. Pretty much, they've got to be really skilled in lots of different ways. We've got crews on tugboats and dredges. So it's a really wide set of things that we do. But what I personally do is I'm a scientist that works the Corps in our what we call program. And what we're tasked with is running the Corps' permitting program for the Clean Water Act. So we both evaluate and issue permits under the Clean Water Act, but we also are charged with making sure that people who get permits follow up on them and do what they're supposed to do. And we do enforcement when people are out there doing work that needed a permit, but they didn't get one.
I see. And so how does that, how do your coworkers feel about that kind of work? I mean, presumably, working in the federal government, this is not the career field that you get rich doing, right? So is this something that your coworkers were kind of specifically interested in, or have they gotten interested in as they, began doing this work? Or, and how do, communities that you're charged with protecting, how do they react to, some of the work that you're able to do regarding the Clean Water Act?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to regulatory, the folks that I've met, generally speaking, have a public service mindset. They feel a calling to serving their community. One of the things that's the coolest about this job that I've certainly experienced myself, and I've talked to colleagues that have experienced the same thing, is seeing in our community the way that our community's needs are being met. When it comes to development, when it comes to making progress, building things, solving problems, but doing it in a way that's balanced with protecting the environment, protecting the navigation system. And so we take that really seriously. And you're right, it's not maybe the most lucrative, but it's a stable job. It's a job that we feel a lot of pride in, and we really get to enjoy the benefits of firsthand as members of our communities.
Right. And so the Corps of Engineers from DC has come out with some new, or they're coming out with some new guidelines regarding enforcement actions and how exactly that's going to be happening. Explain that to us. What's going on there?
Yeah, so just to paint a little bit of history to this, the regulatory program, the sort of relative mix of which parts of our job we do has traditionally been informed by Congress. So Congress will tell us, we want you doing this percentage of your time doing permits and the science that goes behind it. And we want this percent of the time doing enforcement and compliance and that kind of thing. And generally speaking, it's been consistent for a very long time. And I want to say, maybe what they're doing right now is a little more nuanced. It's not necessarily a new policy directive or anything in writing that says, this is the way we're doing things now, and this is a change. But what we're noticing is that there's a new algorithm that our headquarters office for the individual districts, and that's how we're divided workload wise. We each have responsibility for a certain area. Some of us, like Chicago, are really small, and some of us, like Omaha district, are really big. Omaha has 7 or 8 states, whereas we have 7 or 8 counties here in Chicago district. And so what happened to us here in Chicago is that because this algorithm determined that we were doing too many of the enforcement and compliance and those type of non-permitting supporting type of activities compared to the number of permits we were issuing, the number of development permits we're issuing, we scored very near the bottom of the Corps in this metric. And we had our budget cut, and that money was given to a district that had a higher percentage of permitting actions compared to their overall workload. And so what we're seeing is it's not a direct we're telling you can't enforce the Clean Water Act anymore. But they are telling us that if we don't have a high enough percentage of permits, that we're getting our budget cut. And
then your budget will be cut, even if because it's not as if the Corps of Engineers in Chicago is just sitting around, twiddling their thumbs, right? I mean, the work product is there and can be verified, but it's more enforcement oriented. And so there is kind of they're not saying it's a punishment, but there's a budget cut that's being associated with that. Am I understanding that right?
yeah, that's what we're experiencing here. And to be clear, it's not necessarily the same everywhere. It depends how your district scores on their metrics right now. But when it comes to enforcement, one of the things I think about is that we don't view, like I said, we're all scientists. We're not special agents or anything like that. We're not out there raiding people's properties or anything like that. What we're doing is making sure that people that have standards, that do come get their permits, are not at a disadvantage compared to the people that would just go out there with no regard to the rules. And so, I think that when people hear about the Corps of Engineers enforcement part of our program, especially folks, maybe in the building trades or in agriculture, see that as a threat, a problem. And I would encourage people to kind of reframe how they think about that into, a lot of us in the trades, in the labor movement have those standards. We pull the permits. We do things in a way that complies with the law. And so we shouldn't have a competitive advantage to the people who are willing to ignore the law. And, that's what I'm worried about in terms of the overall movement and our community, is that we need our enforcement program as a as a check against these unscrupulous practices. And I guess the last thought I have on that is that the amount of enforcement work that we do should be driven by the amount of unlawful construction that's going on that may have impacts on the environment or on our navigation system that's going on out there without a permit. And so, as opposed to whatever's determined by some algorithm, some data number, like you would see in the corporate sector.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a crazy idea, Colin. The amount of enforcement actions should be driven by the amount of enforcement actions that are needed, rather than some ratio that bureaucrats are trying to meet. That's kind of wild. I'm not sure. That's a wild idea.
That's why we're red today.
Right. There you go. How are your coworkers reacting to this? And how are your coworkers reacting to this?
So the conversations that I've had, I think a lot of us agree that this is not the right tactic. That, first of all, a lot of us were around a decade ago, the last time that we were really metrics focused in our program. And what happened was that all of our metrics were green. That the military officers that run our district love to see things in red, yellow, and green. And so when our permit metrics were green and everybody in command was happy, when it came time for Congress to write the checks, to appropriate money for our program, they never increased our budget because they said, well, look, you're meeting all your metrics, so you don't need more money. And so we had a whole decade where, and of course the cost kept rising, both for labor and equipment, materials, rent on the building, as so on. All the costs keep rising. And so we had to make do with fewer employees, with fewer training opportunities, with fewer of the instruments that we needed to do our work. We were frequently behind what the consultants we work with had in terms of technology and that kind of thing. And eventually our program kind of came around to not rely on those metrics, to not be, we jokingly call it bean counting, right? We finally freed ourselves from that, and now we're finding ourselves back where we were. And so a lot of us are discouraged by that. We, like I said, are scientists. We have both experience in the program, but we also have studied the systems that we work in. And so, and we know the context of our communities. And so, you know, when it comes to environmental justice, which is a priority of this administration, when it comes to the ability to give a voice to working class people, we don't want to be constrained by a metric, an algorithm that's created in Washington to tell us how to do our job.
Right. And so you're president of the union in Chicago, and you're obviously, you know, concerned about this, as are some of your members, or a lot of your members. What is there that can be done from the union perspective to try to fight this, to fight this change?
So I think when we're thinking about things like this, one of the terms that's common out there, and this actually came up at a meeting of the federal sector unionists at Labor Notes recently here in Chicago, and the concept is called bargaining for the common good. And this is the idea that we as labor can push for things that are good for our own community. There's a lot of really cool examples in the federal sector here in Chicago. I know my colleagues over at the Environmental Protection Agency. They're represented by AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, and they've been pushing for the federal pension fund. Yeah. So they've been pushing for the federal pension fund to divest from certain investments that are harming the environment. And so realizing that we have a voice in that and using our voice in negotiations at the bargaining table in a very traditional way is a powerful thing for workers. Here in Chicago, there's a lot of great examples from the Chicago's Teachers Union about how they've been bargaining with the premise that the teachers' working conditions are the students' learning conditions, and that it's inextricable from the health of our community is the health of our schools, which is where the teachers work. And so bringing the power of labor and of collective action and of community action has a lot of exciting precedents and has been gaining a lot of steam lately. I will say, though, that one of the other things is that I tell my workers and the members of my local is that we also have a lot of rights to communicate. Me being on this show and talking about this is because I have a legal right to collective action. I have a legal right to speak about the conditions of my work and of my coworkers' work. And so we can use that. We have a legal right to go talk to our representatives in Washington and of folks that are officials in the executive branch. That's in the law as a protected right for us as federal employees. And so I think we have to bring all of that to bear. And on that last point, when it comes to talking to executive branch officials, another sort of symptom of this corporatization that we're seeing in our agency right now is that they have a push right now for what they call automation of the navigation locks and dams, as well as the hydropower dams in the Army Corps of Engineers across the country. And what they want to achieve is some off-site operations where they can have a control center, maybe in Atlanta or Cincinnati or somewhere, and they're running a whole suite of different facilities from that control center. And we obviously have some really strong thoughts about that and about the effects that might have on safety and on our communities. But what the Corps has done in that case is they set up what they call a governance board, and it's internal to the agency. So they have a decent amount of control over it, but it's getting extra sets of eyes, maybe not involved with doing the actual work of this sort of transformational change, getting those extra eyes on what's going on and shaping the direction, the pace, the manner in which this change is happening. And so one of the things that I'm calling for as president of my local is for them to establish a governance board for this change in the regulatory program as well. And then for both of those boards, I think it's essential that a voice of labor, that workers be appointed to this board with the same reason that you would appoint leadership to this board, folks in leadership positions, because I think that the workers on the ground, the ones who are implementing the program both now and in the future, having their voice, their perspectives on a board like this would really go a long way in making sure that the change is being done in a responsible way. And so far, the Army Corps has completely denied that. We've requested it. We've requested it through our international union, even working with some other international unions, and they've been very steadfastly denying our ability to have a voice in this change. And so I think we're going to have to start using our voice in more and more public ways to call attention to this.
What has been the response from the agency leadership to your asks for union involvement in these policy changes and for this board? What has the agency response been?
So the regulatory program issue that I'm talking to you about, it's all developing right now. It's all very much a live issue. The lock and dam issue that I just referenced, like I said, they stood up that board, I believe it was in August or September of last year. And so it's been some time now, and I made a request, a very, unthreatening, just kind of, hey, I've got expertise in this. I've represented hydropower workers. I've represented lock and dam workers. We've got a viewpoint to bring to the table. And we even pointed out that the Biden administration had released a report. There was a task force on worker empowerment that the administration put out. And one of the things that it pointed out was that one of the reasons that agencies should rely on and incorporate union voices is because the leaders of unions are democratically elected. They're not going to say something that is against their workers' interests because we have accountability baked in. In my agency, in my workplace at least, none of us get to vote on our boss, so we can't control who's on the management side of any particular table, but we do get to vote for who our union leaders are.
Right.
And in my local, we vote on issues that we pursue. We vote when it's time to accept a negotiation, a tentative agreement that we've made with management. We've one of those going on right now. So that democracy brings accountability to a conversation. And so when you've got a governance board, if you put labor seats on that board, you're going to get good input. And we pointed that out and we cited our sources. And of course, they came back and they said, well, we're not legally required to put you on this board, so we're not going to. And we pushed back on that a little and said, we're not arguing that you're legally required to, we're arguing that you ought to. And they came back and reiterated that they weren't required to and that they weren't going to. So we're working to build a grassroots campaign, working with the workers. And like I said, this is is starting right now. We're building this right now. So anybody who's listening that wants to get involved in this, you're absolutely welcome. And we absolutely need you, and we need your voice, and we need people to tell their stories, because this is how we're going to make that change, not by just asking for it.
Yeah, well, obviously keep me updated. Looking forward to continuing to watch this specific campaign. And just to wrap up, you know, we were talking this morning before the show about more broadly the corporatization of the federal government and the hollowing out of the actual work and the diminution, I think that's the word, of institutions like the Corps of Engineers to contract administration agencies, right? And just overseeing work being done in the private sector, as opposed to actually, you know, designing and building and overseeing the thing ourselves. You know, can talk to us a little bit about how you see that, you know, on a broader scale over the last, you know, 5-6 decades, the privatization of the federal government and what that has done to federal employees who want to do this kind of work, and what it's done to the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we've seen, we just bargained a new contract last October, and one of the articles that had been in a previous contract was about contracting out, about what they call the A76 process. It's the process by which the federal government can essentially advertise some part of our responsibility and see if any contractor wants to do it instead of us. We haven't seen that in a long time. I think the fights of the 80s and 90s, where they were directly outsourcing whole shops, whole programs, or individual workers' fees, I think that has hit a low point in my experience. But what we're seeing instead is kind of what you just alluded to. It's, instead of our civil engineer doing the work, it's our civil engineers reviewing what a private sector engineering firm designed. And a lot of times, the reason I'm seeing that happen, it's not because our people don't have the expertise. It's not because we have a bad track record or anything like that. There's nothing like that. But what happens is, you know, I was describing what happened in the regulatory program, where we had flat budgets for a decade. And what that meant was we lost people. We lost, you know, somebody would retire and we just couldn't fill that spot. And eventually it fell off the staffing plan, and that spot's never coming back. And so we lose capacity, not necessarily expertise, but we lose capacity. And so then when it's time to execute a surge in work, you know, Congress tells us, hey, we need you to go solve this problem. Now we may not have the capacity in-house to do it. And so we have to turn to contracting. And I think that is sad for our whole system. I think that there's a great legacy in this country of government employees doing really good work for the communities that they live in and the communities around the country. And we still do that good work. But you see these forces. I think the most stark example in the country right now is with the Postal Service. Obviously, that's you know, a government corporation or whatever they want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's a public service. And I know there's a group out there building a fighting NALC, they call it, the National Association of Letter Carriers. But they're in the same fight, where they have a boss who is from industry. I mean, he's from a corporate America, right? And he's deliberately making it difficult for them to do their jobs, so that then when somebody compares these workers to the private sector, they say, well, look, this is inefficient. We should outsource it. We should contract it. And that's what we're seeing. And it's not always as publicly done as they've done in the Postal Service. It's not always as visible to people as the Postal Service is. But We're seeing that in every corner, I think. I know we see it in our district and in other districts where I've worked. And I think you were saying you've seen it at your job too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, our engineers do not, at least in my division, I've been in the same division since I started working there. So, I don't want to speak too broadly or pretend to have too broad of a view, but in my division, I have never seen one project designed by Corps of Engineers. It's all reviewing, not doing. That's my
Yeah.
little catchphrase. We need a Corps of Engineers where the engineers can do instead of just review. We need to make a slogan out of that.
That's right. I like it. Yeah, the IFPTE represents workers at Department of the Navy. And I'll tell you, the work that's done at our public shipyards these days is very different than it was in the past. We used to build whole warships. And now my understanding is that we have a lot more focus on operating and maintaining warships that are built by private sector. I know that we represent a lot of NASA workers, and a lot of the NASA workers I've talked to, obviously, that's a pretty well-known shift that's happened from the government being the one who is designing and building and operating our spacecraft to the private sector doing that. And so I think this is something that is affecting the whole of government. It's affecting the working class in sort of an insidious way. It's being done piece by piece. It's chipped at, rather than the tactics that they used in the 80s and 90s, like I said, where they would come in and they would just advertise, we're going to take your jobs and we're going to outsource them. Right. And I don't think that's done so much anymore. It's this more subtle change, but it's pervasive.
Yeah. Colin Smy, president of IFPTE Local 777 at the Corps of Engineers in Chicago. Anything else that you wanted to mention before we let you go?
Well, I think we've covered pretty much it. We'll definitely stay in touch. Happy to update you and your listeners on how we do on this quest to. I liked your phrase earlier, but I'd say for us, we want to serve the public, not an algorithm.
That's
right?
Another good.
That's what we're trying to claw back.
Yeah, that's another good one. If you end up,
we'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, if you end up wanting to use my slogan, I will. I'll lend you the trademark for a very cheap price, so we can talk about that after. Thanks, Colin.
All right, I appreciate it, brother.
Yep. All right, like I said, Colin.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Colin Smy, president of IFPTE Local 777 out of the Corps of Engineers in Chicago. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'm going to be forwarding this. Once we clip it, I'm going to be forwarding it to some reporters that I know to try to see if we can't get some more attention on it, because it sounds crazy, absolutely wild. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. 844-899-8857 is the phone number if you want to call in. We will take your calls. We did not get to Boss Watch in the first half of the program, so we're going to go ahead and get to that. It's a pretty slim Boss Watch, but I have some thoughts on the second story of two. So the first one is in South Carolina, where U.S. Department of Labor investigators found a West Columbia gas station and convenience retailer, Seymour Express, failed to pay 29 employees overtime rates as required by law. Specifically, the employer paid straight time for all hours worked and failed to pay the overtime premium of time and one-half employees' hourly rates for hours over 40 in a work week. They recovered in back wages and liquidated damages $153,000 for 29 workers. That is an insane amount of theft that you can only do if you're a boss. That's you can only steal $150,000 from dozens of people if you're a boss. That's just crazy. The Wage and Hour Division Director Jamie Benefiel in Columbia, South Carolina, said the U.S. Department of Labor is committed to ensuring workers get every dollar they earned. Failing to pay the proper rate for all of the hours employees work is a violation employers can and must avoid. We encourage employers with questions to reach out to us for compliance assistance and for help understanding their obligations to their employees. And then the second story is out of Alabama. This is coming from AL.com, where they say that federal investigators say they found 6 underage workers at a large poultry plant in North Alabama and are asking a judge to stop the sale of chicken produced with child labor. Lawyers representing the plant in Jasper say the move is unprecedented and would create undue hardship for the more than 1,000 workers at Marjack Poultry, the largest employer in Walker County. Attorneys for the U.S. Department of Labor filed a civil action against Marjack on May 7th to stop the production and sale of all goods tainted with child labor through May 31st. On May 1st, 2024, investigators with the Wage and Hour Division, U.S. Department of Labor, discovered oppressive child labor at defendants' processing facility, namely children working on the kill floor, deboning poultry and cutting carcasses, the court documents said. The children had been working at the facility for months, and the defendant continually removed goods from the facility the entire time. And now they're referencing this because there is a provision in child labor laws that allow the Department of Labor to stop the sale of products tainted with child labor. That's one of the provisions of child labor law, and why child labor laws is to a certain extent, there are more options for enforcement than with other labor laws, because actually stopping the sale of goods produced with child labor is a pretty big penalty. So attorneys for Marjack Poultry said in court filings that the employees had used forged documents, passed the E-Verify system, and were terminated after their real ages came to light. The lawyers also said the teens were not employed in hazardous areas and worked in areas hanging chickens and removing wings, which do not require the use of heavy machinery. The operations where the children worked resembled a commercial kitchen more than a kill floor, the company claimed. Obviously, the Department of Labor is disputing that. But the Department of Labor announced last year, and still reading from AL.com, that it would use the hot goods provision that I was talking about earlier to prevent companies from profiting from child labor. The company argued that forcing the temporary pause in chicken sales would hurt other workers. A 30-day hot goods injunction would result in approximately 1,000 employees being laid off for 30 days, the company said in court documents. Require the destruction of millions of chickens, placing them in landfills, the destruction of 1 million pounds of meat, interrupt the delivery of feed to growers, and the delivery of birds for processing, resulting in all of the chicken house to miss a full cycle and the resulting economic disaster to the farmers, causing seismic economic consequences on the community. Now, as far as this goes, I don't know exactly, because there's some merit to the argument about, like, okay, look, a 30-day hot goods injunction in, if you're producing like steel beams or car parts or something like that, right? It's not as if, there's not as much relation to the rest of the supply chain. Whereas a hot goods injunction on chicken, you would be wasting a lot of meat that could actually feed people, right? So, it's not as if the arguments there are totally meritless. They obviously, these arguments have nothing to do with the law, right? It's just practically, is this actually the best thing to do for the community? And so, actually disposing of 30 days of meat from the facility, I think probably does sound a little bit wasteful. But should the company be able to profit off of it? The answer is obviously no. What should happen is they should be forced to continue the production of it without child labor and produce it and get it ready for market, and then be forced to give it away. That, I think, but I don't know if mechanically, logistically, legally, statutorily that can happen, right? I don't know if there's a mechanism by which the Department of Labor can do that. And so then the question is, if the Department of Labor can't do that, and if they can't get Marjack to agree to that, to stipulate to that, then should they just be allowed to profit off of child labor when they knew they were in violation of the law, when they knew what the consequences of the violation of the law would be? That's difficult to agree with. It's difficult to agree with the idea that Marjack Poultry should just be able to profit off of child labor when that is against the law. That's difficult to agree to. And of course, all of the disastrous economic consequences, the only thing that I can get behind as far as the merits of the argument is that wasting 1 million pounds of poultry seems like that just, I don't know. I don't like that. That doesn't sound good to me. But the rest of this, Marjack is a huge corporation. They have millions of dollars, billions of dollars, I think. Their CEO, makes millions of dollars. It does not actually have to cause a seismic economic consequence. They could continue paying the workers for 30 days of work, and they could make their growers and farmers and all of these people whole. They could do that. And if there is any mechanism at all that the Department of Labor can force them to do that, they should force them to do that. Because it is not the farmer's fault that Marjack was using oppressive child labor. It's not the farmer's fault, and they should not be penalized for it, and profits should be extracted from Marjack, salaries taken, dividends taken from people at the top and distributed to the people who were not, responsible for these, wicked deeds. That's what should happen. That's what should happen. The disastrous economic consequence does not have to happen. Marjack can and should make people whole to the extent that people will be harmed if a hot goods injunction is placed. And if they are not if they do not do that willingly or settle for that, then the Department of Labor should force them to do that. I don't know what legal mechanisms exist for such a thing, but nevertheless. AL.com goes on to say that it's not the first time Marjack has faced penalties for child labor violations. The company, which is headquartered in Georgia and has locations in Mississippi and Alabama, received fines of more than $200,000 after a 16-year-old worker in Hattiesburg, Mississippi died while cleaning machinery. 16 years old. A freshman in high school, is my understanding. A freshman in high school was killed by bosses in Mississippi. The teen was pulled into a machine in the deboning area that had not been fully deactivated, according to OSHA. And this is another reason to believe that, the company's responses to the Department of Labor and the courts as far as like, oh, no, it's not really a killing floor. It's actually super safe. It's more like a kitchen than anything else. It's so nice. It's so nice working here as a child. That's why you should not believe them, because they have had children working in these incredibly dangerous places, and they have killed children. So, right, you shouldn't believe them, obviously. Debbie Berkowitz, an expert on worker safety in poultry plants, said child labor became a big problem during the COVID pandemic when many plants lost employees. Enforcement of workplace safety regulations decreased before the pandemic, and some plants began hiring teens under the age of 18. But federal law prohibits 16 and 17-year-olds from working in most meat and poultry processing jobs. Reporting from the New York Times found that an increase in children and teens immigrating from Mexico and Central America fueled an increase in child labor. And Berkowitz said that the increase in child labor cases has pushed the Department of Labor to impose tougher penalties. In March, the agency required a Tennessee company to set aside $1.5 million in profits as punishment for using child labor. The investigation began when the agency received a tip that workers under the age of 18 were employed hanging live chickens on hooks attached to the conveyor belt, documents said. Investigators found 2 16-year-olds and 2 17-year-olds working on a floor where workers eviscerated and hung chicken carcasses. In later court filings, attorneys said 2 more underage employees had been identified. So, yeah, really disgusting stuff, and not buying the crocodile tears from the employer or their defenses about the safety of the children employed. Really gross stuff. Really, really, really gross stuff. Patrick says, force means threat of guns, bro. I don't know. Patrick is maybe presumably maybe Patrick is a libertarian. I don't know what, but yes, yes, actually, when people put children in danger, abuse children, yeah, we should use the force of the state to bring these wicked companies to heel and take the profits that they extracted from the bodies of children. Yes, yes, I'm totally comfortable with that, actually. Yes, do it. Yes. I don't know why you would think that I would be like, oh, force means, force them means using force. Yes, Patrick, it does. It does indeed. If you want to debate about it, call in 844-899-8857 because that's just a very silly thing to say. Speaking of child labor, though. We have another child labor story. This one out of some other state where a legislator was defending the use of child labor. And see, this is the issue with, Republicans across the country is, they look at issues like this where a child was killed by bosses in Mississippi, where children were being put in danger in Alabama, in Georgia, and things like this. They see that, and the problem that they see is that this is illegal. Bosses should be allowed to kill children to extract profits from their bodies. That's basically the position of the Republican Party across the country. And as an illustration of that, here is a Republican state legislator defending the use of child labor and arguing for its expansion.
We recognized. Lady from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to speak on the bill.
Proceed, lady.
This is a good bill, and everyone should vote yes for this. But I'm just going to kind of expand here. It seems like the division is great in this room. One side of the aisle versus the other is so obvious. At what point are people going to be self-responsible? Some people seem to think the government is the answer for everything. Free food, free health care, free this, free that, free. But it's not free. These young kids need to be taught self-responsibility. And I can tell you my personal story. I started working at age 9. And I continued to work throughout high school when I was 14, 15. And my parents, I wanted to get a driver's license. And they're like, sorry, Cherie, we can't afford to add you to our car insurance, much less a car. And I went to work in Columbia at 15, but my older brother was 17, so we worked the same location. He drove. He was able to buy his own car and pay his own insurance. And my parents were fully supportive, and it didn't affect any grades whatsoever. My parents always asked me, Cherie, how do you get A+? Well, Mom and Dad, you get 100% on your homework, and you do extra credit. And throughout high school, when I was working 12 months out of the year, my high school counselor came to me and said, Cherie, you're bored. You got enough credits. Graduate early. I graduated early out of high school, went to work full-time, working full-time while going to school. It is good for these kids. And you know what these kids of today are? Majority of them are lazy. They don't know what work ethic is. But they know how to play video games all night. They know how to join gangs. They know how to get into trouble. Get a job and be responsible. Vote yes.
So there you go. Here's the Republican Party position. Children should not be allowed to play video games, and capitalists should be able to extract profits from their bodies. Vote for Republicans. I mean, it's crazy. That is absolutely Looney Tunes. Advocating for children working at 9 years old. 9 years old. That is just wild. Absolutely wild. Fortunately, I do think that most Americans do not believe that we should extract profits from the bodies of 9-year-old children. But, some people who are in elected office do, and that's very, 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 very scary. But hot take, yeah, children should not actually be forced to labor for capitalists. They should be able to play video games. They should be able to get an education. They should be able to focus on their education. They should be able to focus on socialization and having fun and being children. Yes. They know how to play video games and they know how to join gangs. That's, I mean, I don't know what else really there is to say. I don't know really what else there is to say about that. It's just it's crazy that, that people like this exist. But, it is what it is. And, I guess props to her for just saying it out loud and not hiding from it. So, there you go. That was Missouri GOP representative. GOP representative from Missouri. Do crime be video games? Kids today, says We Are Ronin. If kids play video games, then that means they could be making us more money. Capitalists, says Jacob in the chat, not me. Adam is calling BS about her work history. Adam in the chat says somebody should look up her Social Security deposits. Yeah. Alex in the chat says, perhaps there isn't quite enough news on it yet or at all, but I was hoping to hear about the UPS employee who lost their life in the Dallas warehouse the day before yesterday. I have not heard about that. UPS employee, Dallas warehouse. Yeah, and I'm not seeing any I'm not seeing any news about it at all. If you'd like to call in and talk to us about it, phone number is open 844-899 TVLR 844-899-8857. We have another story out of Argentina. We've been giving you a few updates about Argentina here and there. So because we've been talking enough about this, most of our listeners, I think, are going to be aware of Argentinian President Javier Milei, a self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist who is seeking to raise taxes on poor and working-class folks while lowering them for the rich. Another plank in his extreme anti-worker, anti-public agenda, and we've been talking about some other planks of those agenda, like his tax proposals, like his privatization proposals, and anti-union proposals. One of them is the elimination of Argentina's public broadcasting service. The Union Network International, also known as Uni Global Union, is calling on its affiliates to support the Argentinian broadcast unions as they fight Milei's agenda. In a statement, they explained in part that extreme right Argentinian President Javier Milei has vowed to dismantle Radio y Televisión Argentina, RTA, which is Argentina's public broadcasting group. This includes the 51 public radio stations and the renowned channels such as Canal 7, which is the oldest TV network in Argentina and has a long-standing history of broadcasting to remote areas not covered by private companies. Other TV stations at risk include sports channel Deport TV and educational channels Encuentro and Paca Paca. President of the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, Matthew Loeb from the United States, wrote to the U.S. Congress regarding this situation, saying in part that delegating public communication to the market will result in the emptying of spaces that guarantee the diversity of cultural expression and fundamentally the right to reliable information. Public media are fundamental to guarantee information pluralism, cultural diversity, and the strengthening of democracy. Moreover, they represent a fundamental and indispensable tool in democratic societies. No developed country in the world lacks a public media system. Public service media organizations play a key role in our democratic societies. Many of our members are creators, technicians, and other workers in public media organizations who create high-quality, independent, and diverse entertainment, information, and education, providing a universal service for citizens. The dual system of public and commercial media allows countries to develop a better, stronger, and inclusive media ecosystem. Argentina has a strong dual system with high-quality public media. We call on you to preserve and further strengthen public media for the benefit of all citizens. The world is watching closely the evolution of this attack on the public communication and the important role that the Congress of the Republic of Argentina is playing at this juncture. We stand in solidarity with, support, and accompany SAT-SAID and the workers of the public media of Argentina and ask you do everything in your power to prevent the government from moving forward with these policies that are so harmful to the Argentinian people. So that's another story that we'll be keeping our eyes on. And if you have any other stories about Argentina or other countries, particularly in the American or in the Latin America, Central and South America, I'd be interested in that. But any story across the globe for some of those quick hits, just to increase our listeners' awareness of what's going on in other parts of the globe. I think that kind of stuff is important and relevant to try to connect all of our fights and stories from this country and from other countries. So if you have any stories like that, feel free to submit them. TVLR.fm/contact is where you can do so. Another UAW story is out of the Warren Stamping Plant, where over 1,000 members of UAW Local 869 have voted to authorize a strike over the company's refusal to address health and safety grievances at the facility. We must stand up and stand together for this health and safety grievance procedure because this is our livelihood, said Local 869 member Shawn Smith. So let's stand up at Warren Stamping and take care of us the way we need to be taken care of. The UAW said that workers at the plant are facing a wide range of unresolved issues, including problems with ventilation fans, ergo matting, personal protective equipment, flooding, basement lighting and flooring, restrooms, oil leaks, overall sanitation, and more. UAW Local 869 President Romaine McKinney III said, "Not only do we want these health and safety grievances resolved, we want our members to leave the same way they came. We want our members to understand they're not just a number or just a body on the line. They will come to work and feel like they have some ownership in that building." Warren Stamping supplies over half a dozen Stellantis plants from Windsor, Ontario to Saltillo, Mexico, and any work stoppage could particularly impact production of the Dodge Ram, Jeep Wrangler, and Jeep Wagoneer. Stellantis made nearly $20 billion in profits last year, and Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares was compensated over $37 million in 2023. So this is a really interesting part of what they were able to win in in their contract with the big three, including in Stellantis, is they were able to, one of the things that they were able to win was the right to strike over investment decisions, jobs, and production decisions and things like this. But actually something that the UAW has, and every worker another thing that they were able to win was the ability to strike over health and safety grievances, which is something that, I'm not super clear on. I know that that you have much more liberal authority to strike and it be protected under the National Labor Relations Act for health and safety issues. But once you are in a contract, I'm not sure how much a contract can restrict that right to strike. I'm going to have to look into that. But I know the UAW, obviously, they feel like they have the right to strike over health and safety grievances in their contract. So, sorry about that. They feel like they have the right to strike over health and safety grievances in their contract, so they are threatening this. And that is one of the benefits of having the right to strike, even within contracts, is that you still have that lever of power to exert and that leverage to exert against the company when they are doing things like this, like putting your members in bodily danger, in danger of bodily harm. So that's another story that we will be watching and looking forward to seeing the successful resolution of for UAW workers. So I think that is actually going to be it for us today. I know it's a little bit early, but I don't have just a whole lot else that I had prepared to talk about. So, if anybody else wants to call in as I'm giving my plugs, feel free to do so. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. And if you're listening to this throughout the week, you can always leave a voicemail. You can leave a voicemail at any time. If you're listening to us at 3 in the morning and you say, hey, I want to give them a piece of my mind about this, that, or the other thing, then give us a call, 844-899-8857. That's where you can do that. But appreciate everybody tuning in. You can make a donation to the program on a one-time basis or recurring monthly basis at tvlr.fm/donate. You can also buy our TVLR logo caps at tvlr.fm/store. And you can submit story recommendations or guest recommendations at tvlr.fm/contact. We have some great stuff lined up for you for the rest of this month. Next week, we are going to be talking to Professor Michael Goldfield of the Southern Key, who wrote the Southern Key. I'm so excited for that. That's going to be a great conversation. We are also, in the next couple of weeks, going to be talking to John Melrose about his book, Fighting Times, and we're going to be talking to Mark Brown, who is looking to produce a TV show about Blair Mountain. Lots of cool stuff coming up, lots of good guests, and lots of things happening in Alabama. We're going to continue to cover the UAW campaign to organize the non-union sector and across the South. And the loss at Mercedes is just a bump in the road. They're going to keep organizing, and workers are going to keep winning. So we'll be there for it when it happens. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Thanks for your time. We will see you next week.